Hello everyone, welcome to the second part in the series of making my carbon shoes. So I've taped the two halves together, waxed the inside. Now I'm going to go pour some plaster of Paris in it and hope it doesn't leak and leave it for about 24 hours. The plaster is full to nearly the top. Bubbles are just coming to the surface. Slight bit of a leak down here, but it's like oozing out, so I think it'll sort of start to set before it completely empties the shoe, and I can like have the water level like quite low because I cut it high, because you can see the cut on that's very low on here. The back's pretty high, but yeah, I'm not too fussed about that. I didn't capture it on film because I was kind of in a rush, but I mixed up some resin with some glass bead fillers and filled the bottom of this up. I put some nuts in here to hold that, so fingers crossed if I do this. I think a chicken's laying an egg. Yep, good, it turns. Crikey, that was loud. Yes, so I filled it with glass beads to seal the nut in and give a solid surface. It's a little bit heavy, but I'm not too fussed. So if I do this, oh look, it peels away. Oh, there's a few holes. I might just have to fill them later. Yeah, nice and smooth, something to bond the top on once I finish the actual shoe part. So I have applied body filler, try to get some good light to it. The pinkish one is like the heavy duty stuff that you get from a cheap shop, and the green stuff is this Dolphin Glaze, which is what I used in here and what I used on my streamliner fairing to fill in all the imperfections before I painted it, and all these pinholes. So it's nice and smooth. I've rounded the toes off and added like maybe a millimeter. And then what I'll do now is I'll leave it for a couple of days to dry out completely. Probably put it in the sun on this bench here for my seedlings. And once it's dried completely, I will wrap it in fiberglass, a couple of layers, one to give me some thickness to the shoe, so when I do the carbon, it's like, you know, accommodating for a sock thickness, and also to provide some strength and something to smooth completely, so the inside of the shoe is like completely dead smooth, and also apply a wax and a liquid plastic release agent coating. So I think once I do that, I should be able to form the shoe fine. What I'll do is I'll do this, then I'll attach the inner sole to that, put some cling wrap over it, do a form of the inner sole, which I can then hopefully attach to the bottom. I'm not sure exactly how I'll finish it off, but yeah, hopefully I can somehow stick the inner sole and then like blend it in, so I can like have the foot as a separate piece to the inner sole, like fiberglass formed piece, and once it's all finished I just like chisel away the corners and pop the shoe back off it. I have just encased my foot in carbon and I've filled the bucket up with water, but I will bore you the exact process that you saw last time in the other episode, and pretty much skip this part till I get up to the part where I've got 2 feet cast in plaster with the body filler filling all the toe gaps. Both feet are now complete. I've drilled a hole here and I've put some dowels in this timber so I can grab this like that and stick that like that, and then I can lay the fiberglass over it. makes it easier to hold and spin around and stuff. I've done the other side of this, so all I have to do is lay the fiberglass and then figure out how I'm going to mount that to accommodate for the extra size that it takes up. Alright, so the fiberglass is laid onto the shoes. There's little bits like this that are kind of dry, and little bits like this that are sticking up just a tad. Once the resin starts to go tacky to a point where I can touch it and it sort of depresses and stays there, that's when I'll come along and sort of tap it down with my hand and smooth it out as much as I can, get all these air bubbles out, and hopefully it'll be smooth enough that when I sand it, it doesn't sand through. Kind of like here, that one. Just got to massage those out. So what we have here is my shoe with the Gorilla Tape laid over from the inner sole up to the foot to fill in most of the gap. It's done it pretty well, except for this one corner just here where it sort of dips a bit. But the rest of it's really nice. So now I'll lay probably like 4 or 5 layers of cling wrap on, so I know that the fiberglass won't stick to it. And then I'll take the fiberglass and wet it down, lay it over probably up to about here, and then I'll wrap it again in cling wrap to create that form of the inner sole. So then hopefully when I take everything off, I can pop that back on, fill it with like a glass bead filler, same as this, so then I can like pop it on and off, kind of like what you would expect this to look like. So it can pop on and off from the bottom of the foot, and then hopefully when I go to form the shoe, I can just pop it on, tape it in place, form the shoe, cut the slot for where the split is going to go, then the shoe will hopefully pop off, and then the inner sole will hopefully pop out of that or come with the foot as I take it off. So that's the idea, and we will see if it works. And I don't even know if it's going to be a comfortable shoe yet, but we'll see if it works when we get there. The shoes have been laid in fiberglass and the cling wrap laid over the top of it. Looks pretty nice, there's not too many air bubbles. Looks nice and tight. Might put one layer just around here to bind the heel in, just like that. Let's wait a couple of hours and see how it looks. I have here the 2 castings of the bottom that I was doing yesterday. As you can see, they've been trimmed up, and I've done a little bit of a texture mark around it, because what I plan on doing, take it out, you can see how perfectly the inner sole fits, and then you can see how perfectly my foot fits in it. Look at that. Hold on. Boom. Perfect fit for the heel, perfect fit around the toes, absolutely amazing. Perfect fit around there. So that matches up against the foot like that, so it's going to mold perfectly into the foot. And then we've got the bottom bit where it's going to go like that, and I'll glue it in place. What I'll do is, once I form the carbon fiber shoe, I'll glue this in place, and then I'll do a carbon fiber over the top. So I'll fill in all these little gaps here, and then I'll wrap it up to about here in carbon again and suck a vacuum, so it forms this onto the bottom of the shoe. But what I plan on doing now is I take the inner sole out like that, and this will sit down too low. See how the line's there, and it needs to come up to about there. It's a little bit too low, so what I'll do is I'll pour some of the glass beads. I'll put more cling film on that, pour some glass beads in that, and then put the shoe on up to that point, up to that line, and all the rest will ooze out the sides, and I can scrape it off. And then what I can do after it's set is pop it out, and I'll have pretty much this, which is not very thick, but pretty much this with the extra bits like at the front filled in, like this bit filled in. Because if you look at it, it's not the smoothest surface, and over here it's a little bit too wide. So when I vacuum form, I want it to be quite snug there. So what I'll do is I'll do the glass bead thing, and once I've got the glass bead, I'll stick it to the bottom of the foot, and I'll just use a bit of sandpaper to transition it real smoothly into this. So then when I go to form the carbon fiber shoe, I can sort of just glue it on with a bit of, like a few dollops of silicone, maybe something light that I can peel it off easy. So then I can form the entire carbon shoe around basically this, well, basically this on the bottom of that in glass bead resin stuff, which is like super hard. So it might, you know, it might crack, it might snap, but you can glue it back together and it'll hold. And then we'll be basically given this shape of the bottom of a foot to stick onto the carbon. So that's the plan. There's been a slight change of plan with my design. The inner sole design didn't work. It was too thin around pretty much all the parts. So what I did was, because I had this molded to the shape of the inner sole bottom with only a couple of layers of 100 GSM or 135 glass, you can pretty much say that that bottom shape is this bottom shape. And I filled it with glass beads, put the foot back on up to this line here, which was the line of inset that it needed to be at, and the glass bead has filled up the gap. So that's going to be my inner sole shape now. So I've got a bit of over spillage and a bit of trimming up to do, but what I figured here was where it's like gone bumpy on the corners, basically I can round that smooth. Doesn't matter if I sand through the fiberglass, because it'll just go into the resin glass bead filler underneath, and then it'll give me an absolutely perfect shape on the bottom, which over here is what I've done. So you can see I've even blended this part up as much as I can. I might even go just a bit more just before I finish. But what I'll do is I'll put sticky tape along here just so no resin can get in and under. Then I'll wax it and then put release agent underneath. So I've done that pretty much all the way around. And if I stick that back on, it should, it was earlier, coming off. So perfect. So what I'm going to do now is just brush a bit of resin onto that to give it a gloss finish like this has. I've sanded this back a bit actually, so it sands out all the bumps because I had it sitting like that, and there's a few runs, but that's going to be my plan now. So this snugly fits onto that perfectly. Then I can make the shoe of this, which is the inner sole and my foot. You can see by the shine that I've had some very good success. The foot fits perfectly into the inner sole casting. Slight little bumps here around the edge where the resin has dripped over, so I'll just get a bit of sandpaper and smooth that out into the contour of a foot, and then I will be ready to start cutting carbon fiber out and templating the sections that I'll do. Try and do like a bottom section and a couple of sides that sort of contour up into here, and then like a top one or something, just so it all blends in nicely and I'm not left with any creases at all. And I may even try to resin infuse this rather than wet layup, but we'll see how we go. I'll think about that later. Kind of see a bit of shine between the transition of the foot and the inner sole. That's some silicone, so it's only just holding the bottom of the foot on, and then I've blended it in with silicone. And then what I'll do now is spray it with a clear coat, just like your standard like rattle can clear coat, just to get rid of all this scratchy business that I made when I sanded out all the bumps on the resin. And then it'll be ready to go to lay some carbon on. Because the carbon on this foot doesn't really have to be structural and I don't have to focus on the direction of the weave, I've cut out some templates out of a bit of rag just to make it easier to lay out the carbon, so I get a more uniform fold around the edges. So I've got the bottom, which folds up to about there, and then I've got the outside of a foot, which goes from there up to that line, and then the other side goes from here like that up to this line, and then I've just got a straight bit in the middle to fill the gap, and then the split on Andrea's shoe goes down to about here from the middle, so that'll cut nicely across. And I'm not sure exactly how many layers I'll do, probably 2 or 3 with the overlap in where it overlaps. There'll be just, you know, a little bit more carbon, probably 4 or 6 layers. It's currently 9 p.m. Been staying up way past my bedtime to do a coat of release agent on here. I've done a couple. It's a little bit runny. That's okay, because although it looks bumpy, from what I've figured in the past, it doesn't really show up when you do a vacuum form. Even though this is the internal surface of a shoe, if I was doing an external surface like the fairing for my bike, it actually doesn't show up that much, so that's okay. It's nice and thick. Few little thin spots there, but that's where the silicone is, so hopefully nothing will stick. But yeah, ready to take some carbon. I think I'll let it cure overnight. By the time I've cut my vacuum bag and cut out the templates, I think that'll be nice and cured and ready to basically do an infusion on. I was thinking I will stick the carbon on with some sticky spray, and then just wet it out with dabbing technique using a paintbrush, and then I'll vacuum bag it that way. Because I've found that if you do 2 layers of cloth, you can use the dabbing method and it'll penetrate both layers. Any more than that, it struggles to get through. But if I do a vacuum pull on that, the excess resin will like get pushed into the internal If not, I can like dab the first 2 layers and then put a third on by hand, because it's not going to slide around too much after that. I've got all my carbon bits cut out, bottom, outside, inside and top bit, and I've got some peel ply that I'm going to put on the bottom so it gives a rough texture, so when I come to glue it to this bit, it sticks a lot better than just smooth carbon. And I've got my vacuum bag ready to go. Some spray adhesive. I prefer 3M Super 77, but you can't buy that in the shops here. So this cheap crap stuff's good enough. Sorry for not filming the layup, but you know, it's pretty boring, and you know, it's hard when you're on your own. But we've just done a vacuum pull. Gauge is broken, but we're holding vacuum. I just tested by turning a vacuum pump on and opening the valve, and there was no tone change of a vacuum pump. It didn't load up and then like set steady at a certain tone. So it's holding vacuum from here through the pot and into the shoe. I've got breather material down the front and under the bottom to about there. I could go all the way, but I'm not too fussed. What I want is this excess resin. That's exactly what I want, because that means with the layers of cloth that I've got, so there's 3 layers on the side and 2 on the bottom, so there's 5 layers of carbon along where the seam meets about this much, and I want excess resin so I know that it's going to penetrate deep into the cloth and get all the way onto the inside. Because if it was the breather cloth all the way down and across the whole thing, there is a potential to suck all the resin off the top of the cloth and not have it penetrate down deep into the layers. So just going to leave it in the sun for, you know, a little bit, let it cure a bit. It is fast cure, so it shouldn't take long. Just keep checking every now and then, because we got a few bubbles. Just keep making sure that it's like fully squished down, and make sure that I haven't missed any spots where like there's a pleat in the carbon, because that's definitely not what I want.